Hey geeks! I don't know if you saw this news about British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, but he's in hot waters because of a garden party his team held in May 2020, while the rest of the UK had to face super strict social distancing rules. At that time, Brits couldn't even see people outside unless it was just two of them and they were 6 feet apart. I mean, people were literally doing Zoom funerals while Boris's party-loving team were taking shots. Now, Boris apologized, but I don't know if he can survive this one. And I'm kind of worried about it because he's my favorite person to impersonate. I know the rules, and I know we made the rules, and we flouted those rules, and I understand everyone's rage. The rules are not being properly followed by the people who make the rules. I know I said there had been no party and that I broke no rules, but that's because I really thought this was implicitly, which I thought also means explicitly, a work event. I will stop making dumb excuses, and also lying, and in hindsight, I would have behaved differently. We got a lot to get through, but before we do, please hit that subscribe button below and like this video. The US and Russia held diplomatic talks this week to see if they could calm things down at the Russia-Ukraine border, and basically, not much happened. Russia has been staging live fire exercises with troops and tanks near the Ukrainian border, and in order to stand down, they've demanded that NATO never accept Ukraine as a member, and that NATO remove troops and weapons placed in former Soviet countries that are now NATO members. I mean, these demands would be fine if Russia were a member of NATO, but since they're not, it's kind of unacceptable to dictate NATO's policies or try to have a vote on whether Ukraine becomes a member one day. Now, the US made it clear Russia's ridiculous proposal was non-starter, but they came ready to compromise on other military-related issues, like where certain military equipment is based and the size of our military exercises in the region. So both sides hobnobbed for 8 hours, and basically it yielded nothing. But let me give you both sides of this. The positive angle is that both the US and Russia seem to show genuine interest in talking. And since things are at a real low point for us, this could be a real opportunity to let out our grievances and have the counseling session we've all been dreaming of. But on the negative side, the chance of war here is a real threat. So here's a little advice from me. Russia doesn't enter into wars it cannot win. It's not how President Putin operates. His military could likely take over Ukraine if it wanted to. And so we and the Europeans have to communicate to the Russian government that the costs of invading Ukraine would be too high. So President Biden has said he would slam Russia with sanctions, and I do believe they'd be really tough, but we need Europe in complete lockstep. Otherwise, our sanctions alone won't be enough. This is my version of a wink and a nod to Germany to woman up and threaten to shut down the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline that's supposed to go from Russia to Germany. And at the same time, without making any promises on the future, we could signal that Ukraine isn't about to become a member of NATO at this time anyway. Now in Washington, Republicans and Democrats are busy pointing the finger at each other for not knowing how to handle Russia. So I'll let you in on a little secret. Both sides have been getting it wrong since Russia annexed Crimea in 2014. I speak the truth. Right now, we need to be collectively focused on preventing a full-scale war. And so we need to figure out the perfect mix of tough sticks and compelling carrots and do it together with some of Russia's most valued trading partners in order to reach a diplomatic solution. The drama with tennis star Novak Djokovic continues, but now it's taken on a whole new political angle. So just to recap, Djokovic arrived in Melbourne, Australia last week, and his visa was cancelled when he entered because he didn't have a valid exemption for the country's vaccination requirement. So then a judge decided he could stay, but now Australian authorities are appealing that decision, especially since Djokovic's story is kind of sketch. He claimed his exemption is due to the fact that he got COVID on December 16, but then he admitted he didn't isolate right away, and he also lied on other parts of his visa application. So now Australia is debating whether to ban him from the country for 3 years, which means he wouldn't be able to play in the Australia Open for that time period. And now it's opening a whole can of political worms for the Australian Prime Minister. Meanwhile, the French, who are still upset about that whole nuclear submarine deal they got cut out of, are like, "We'll take you, Djokovic!" So to get the view from the land down under, I spoke to Misha Zielinski, who's my friend, Australian trade unionist, Fulbright scholar, and host of the Diplomates podcast.
Joining me from Australia, which means so much. You are the perfect person to talk to me about this. Can you explain how people are reacting to the Djokovic story where you are, why this has caused such a drama, and what this means politically for Australia's Prime Minister?
Yeah, so what this comes down to is whether or not you think Novak Djokovic is a political prisoner or a massive wanker and self-indulgent millionaire. And so I think most Australians kind of sit with the latter. And so, what this is really framed around is the experience Australians have had over this COVID period. And the real question in all of it is fairness. Are we going to have one set of rules for everybody and then one set of rules for special people and millionaires? And, generally seeing around the world a political price for that. Boris Johnson's paying a price for that. But in Australia in particular, Aussies hate that. We hate people being treated specially. And so the context of all this is very important. You've got a very grumpy population at the moment. We've just had essentially our summer and Christmas ruined. The last 2 years, people have not been able to travel. I haven't seen my mum until she just got home from Spain. So I hadn't seen her since the beginning of COVID, and Aussies have not seen people at all. And so into that, we also had our vaccination rollout was very delayed by our Prime Minister. He bungled the orders. And so people were locked down unnecessarily in 2021. And so we got to summer and everyone was promised this big hot vax summer, and it hasn't happened because of Omicron. Omicron's now ripping through the population. We've got tens of thousands, at least maybe hundreds of thousands of cases, depending on how they're being recorded. So into that flies Novak Djokovic. And he says, well, the rules don't apply to me. And everyone says that. We've got a vaccinated population of nearly 95%. So anti-vaxxers are not popular here as it is. And he's trying to cut the queue. And Novak knew the rules and he sort of tried to get around them. And his choice was clear. Could have got vaccinated, or he didn't have to get vaccinated, and then he couldn't play. And they tried to sort of craft this special exemption for him. But the issue for the PM here is that right now, people are queuing up outside trying to get their hands on rapid antigen tests, which seems crazy, right? And there's a big debate here about whether or not they should be free. People are unable to test themselves at the moment. They're queues for PCR tests. There's queues to get rapid antigen tests. We've got people getting sick. And people are very upset with the PM. And so he's using this as a distraction, and he knows he's got to be tough on borders. The Liberal Party, which is the Conservative Party here, their big thing is being tough on borders, and he can't allow a millionaire to get away with a special exemption.
Yep, I agree with you. And I love your way of describing these things. It's why I brought you on. Thank you so much, Misha. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and good luck.
Thanks.
North Korea says it conducted another hypersonic missile test, while their leader, Kim Jong-un, gleefully watched. This is North Korea's third reported test of a hypersonic missile, and it comes after 2 ballistic missile tests last week. So the US and other countries condemned the test and called on North Korea to stop being so destabilizing. Honestly, every time the world pays attention to another drama, like with what's happening with Russia right now, Kim Jong-un makes a desperate attempt to have people pay attention to him again. Hey guys, look at me! I have guns too! Hypersonic missiles are worrisome because they're hard to detect and intercept. And that's because they move close to the Earth's surface, they have unpredictable flight paths, and they hit their targets really fast. In fact, these weapons can go up to 5 times the speed of sound. They're also scary because it's hard to know whether those missiles are carrying a highly explosive warhead or a nuclear one. Now, I know I poke fun at Kim Jong-un, but this is super dangerous, especially for a leader who's completely batshit crazy. I mean, he and his team just claimed that his dad invented the burrito. I rest my case. This test comes a month after North and South Korea agreed to declare a formal end to the Korean War. And it comes hours after the US said they'd be interested in renewing talks with the North Koreans. It's also just criminal, because Kim Jong-un spends all of his country's resources developing these weapons when millions in his country are literally at risk of starvation. The US government sanctioned 5 North Korean officials this week in response to these tests. And you know I love me some sanctions, but it's going to take a lot more than that to get this behavior to stop. US chipmaker Intel sent a letter to its suppliers last month telling them to make sure not to source any goods or services from the Xinjiang region of China, since many governments have imposed restrictions on imports from there. Xinjiang is in the northwest corner of China, where the Chinese regime is committing genocide against the minority Muslim Uyghur community. In fact, over 1 million Uyghurs have been detained and forced into hard labor there. And so the US and others have told their businesses that they can't import goods from that region because we would just be further fueling China's repression. So not only is the Chinese regime abusing the Uyghurs, but they're profiting off the abuse. So Chinese social media blows up after Intel's letter, and Intel apologizes, saying it was just meant to be in compliance with US law and not a statement of its position on the Chinese regime's genocide. Nice. So now Intel deleted any reference or mention of Xinjiang or China in that letter, and instead they just say that the company prohibits any human trafficked or involuntary labor throughout extended supply chains. Way to show them who's boss. I asked the Glorious Geeks if you thought what Intel did was wrong, and 75% of you said yes. The Geeks know what they're talking about. By bending to their demands, we are allowing the Chinese government to censor American companies, and no one wins with that strategy other than the Chinese government. So for their ridiculous and criminal behavior, and since Intel clearly doesn't see that its move enables this kind of repression, they're both on my list this week. January is National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month, and the reason January was chosen for that is because it's the same month when Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, when 4 million slaves were freed here on January 1st, 1863. So in honor of this, I wanted to feature Safe Horizon, which is a nonprofit based in New York that provides assistance, advocacy, and support to victims who've experienced human trafficking and other crimes. 24.9 million people are victims of forced labor, which includes forced sexual exploitation. And if you think it doesn't affect people here in the United States, then think again. Aurelia left her hometown in Africa to earn extra money to support her family. And so this guy recruited her to be a dancer in the United States, where she ended up being tricked into a life of working 18 hours a day as a dancer, often without food or pay. This guy actually recruited a number of women who lived in fear of reporting him or leaving because he threatened to hurt them if they did. So after a couple years, Aurelia and the other women escaped to New York City, and they found Safe Horizon, which helped support and protect them. And now Aurelia has a stable job here. Unfortunately, thousands of individuals in the US have been trafficked here, but hopefully with organizations like Safe Horizon, we can crush that number to 0. Thanks, Geeks. Before we go, I want to honor a young athlete who passed away in a really tragic accident here in my hometown in Connecticut. Teddy Balkind was a sophomore at St. Luke's School, and he was playing in an ice hockey game where he suffered a neck injury, which he didn't survive. So I just wanted to take a moment to honor him and to send all my love and strength to his family and friends and school. The way I've seen our community come together for him and his family is truly inspiring. And if you're interested in doing anything to help, Teddy's friend Sam Brand launched a petition to make neck guards mandatory for all ice hockey players. So I signed it, and I hope you will too. Thanks, Geeks. Please don't forget to subscribe and like this video. It means the world. And let me know if there's anything in particular you want me to cover. I will give you a shout out. Stay fabulous.